from China. There are two reasons why a country like Nepal would take assistance from China. One, the Chinese assistance is very attractive because see, China is a massive power. Its economy is many times larger than India, right? It has a much superior military strength compared to India. So the loans, the investments China can provide will be exponentially higher than what India can provide. Any small country would be attracted by the massive loans that China is going to provide. Even if it pushes them into a debt burden later, initially they all feel attracted by the loan, they go ahead and take the loan from China. That is one reason. Second, Nepal wants to have its options. Nepal does not want to depend only on India. We have already studied in the last class what problems Nepal has with India. There is honestly one mistake India has done. India's biggest mistake in Nepal is that we have excessively interfered in Nepal's internal matters. This is what I pointed out in the last class. Even many experts have the same opinion. Rajiv Sikri, then Harsh Pant, they all have the same opinion that we have committed a blunder over the decades by excessively meddling inside Nepal, by interfering in their internal issues. This has harmed our image. It has promoted anti-India sentiments. So Nepal is looking for diversifying its dependency. It does not want to depend on India alone. That is why Nepal every now and then takes the help from China. It plays the China card so that it need not depend on India all the time. Akash is asking, sir, which are the Buddhist Asian countries? Buddhist Asian countries include Bhutan, China. In China as well, Buddhism is still popular. Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Vietnam and Thailand, Japan and South Korea. Praveen is asking, sir, Nepal people can enter India without visa. Yes, they can. Because we have an open border, so they can freely enter India without a visa. Mahjabeen is asking, BBIN is implemented or yet to be implemented? It's an ongoing initiative. We have signed the motor vehicles agreement. India, Bangladesh, Nepal have signed the motor vehicles agreement, and they're in the process of implementing it. Anubhav is asking, isn't Nepalese recruitment in Gorkha regiment a point of dispute? And if taken from India's point of view, how and why India is trusting the Gorkha regiment in guarding our borders? Not at all. See, the Indian army has had great faith in the Gorkha community of Nepal. Even since colonial times, the Gorkhas have played a tremendous role in safeguarding India. All right. So there is that level of trust that exists between the Gorkha community and the Indian army. All right. And also, please understand, the Gorkha regiment is not just exclusive for the Gorkhas today, but we do recruit Nepali Gorkhas into the Indian armed forces, into Indian security forces, and they've done a phenomenal job. There's no reason why they can't be trusted. Okay. So I've tried covering as many questions as possible. Now let's move on to the next topic, that is India's relations with Bhutan. Compared to Nepal, it's a relatively smaller topic. All right. There are fewer issues to cover, but nevertheless, it's a very, very important topic. India-Bhutan relationship is actually referred to as a model relationship. India and Bhutan are so close to each other, and we have such amount of trust in the relationship that we barely have any issues or conflict in this relationship. That's why it's called a model relationship. It's often said that if there is a bilateral relationship, it should be like this, the relations between India and Bhutan. It's a very special, very unique relationship. So let's understand everything about Bhutan. Let's talk about its geography, its location, its culture, its unique economy, what kind of relations India has, why Bhutan is strategically important for India. All these points have to be covered, and we should also understand the role of China in Bhutan. All right. So here you're looking at the map of Northeast India, which highlights Bhutan. This is where Bhutan is located. Without doubt, it occupies a strategic location just like Nepal. Why? Because it's a Himalayan country. It is sandwiched between two large Asian powers, that is China and India. It's a landlocked country, as you can see. That's one important point you should write down. Bhutan is a landlocked country, surrounded entirely by India and China. Which are the Indian states sharing the borders? You have Sikkim over here, West Bengal, Assam, Arunachal Pradesh. These are the 4 Indian states that share immediate boundaries with Bhutan. Now, if you observe the map here, there is this narrow corridor that you can see, this narrow land corridor. Can you observe this narrow corridor here? This is called the Siliguri corridor of India. The Siliguri corridor. Siliguri is a place in West Bengal. All right. So here, India becomes very narrow. Indian territory narrows into a very small land corridor. The width of this corridor is as low as 28 kilometers at the shortest point. It's hardly around 28 to 60 kilometers wide. And this is the only link, only connection between Northeast India and the rest of India. Understood? This is the only link that we have. And it's such a short and narrow land corridor because it is surrounded by international borders. Here, Nepal is present. Then on the other side, it is Bangladesh. So between Nepal and Bangladesh, there is this small part of India, a very narrow corridor of India, which is the only link between Northeast India and the rest of India. That is why Siliguri corridor is considered as a choke point for India. It's a strategic choke point for India. It's a very vulnerable point because if Siliguri corridor is blockaded, if for some reason there were to be a blockade at Siliguri corridor, we are going to lose access to Northeast India. Northeast India will be cut off from rest of India. That's why Siliguri corridor is also called the chicken's neck of India. Is that clear? Because this corridor is as vulnerable as a chicken's neck. Chicken's neck is very slender, very long and slender. It can be easily cut off. Similarly, the Siliguri corridor is a chicken's neck for India. It's a narrow corridor which can be easily blockaded or cut off, which will cut off the Northeast region from rest of India. This fear of India comes from the 1962 war with China. During the 1962 war with China, Chinese troops, the People's Liberation Army, they had breached the Indian borders here, across the Chumbi Valley, breached across the Nathula Pass in Sikkim, and they had come quite close to Siliguri corridor. The PLA had intruded deep into Indian territory during the 1962 war. Across Arunachal Pradesh, parts of Assam and Sikkim, Chinese troops had intruded into Indian territory. All right. So India has always had this fear since then that if China were to occupy the Siliguri corridor, if it were to block out the Siliguri corridor, we will be cut off from Northeast India. That is why it's a vulnerable choke point. It's a strategic choke point for India. It's a military weakness. And hence, we are focused on strengthening our security across this region. We are focused on improving our relations with the 3 countries, Nepal, Bhutan, and Bangladesh, which are crucial for stability and security in the region. So Bhutan is very vital because Bhutan is located at the junction of India and China. We actually share borders with each other. This is a tri-junction point. All right, there are two tri-junction points here where China meets Bhutan and India. Similarly, over here near Sikkim, near Nathula Pass, you have a place called Doklam, the Doklam Plateau. This is another tri-junction point, all right, where India, China, and Bhutan meet. So that is why Bhutan is extremely crucial for India, for our security, for countering the Chinese threat and Chinese influence. Bhutan is extremely crucial for us. And Bhutan also believes the same. Bhutan feels extremely threatened by China, all right, especially since 1950, since China annexed Tibet. Bhutan has been extremely worried, and it has always sought the defense, the protection, the support of India. Is that clear? Since China became aggressive and it became an expansionist power, Bhutan has always sought close relations with India, not just in the foreign policy domain, but also in the defense domain, the security domain as well. That's one reason why India and Bhutan share very unique and very important strategic relations. Now, please understand that Bhutan is blessed with a unique geography and a unique culture. If you look at its geography, it's part of the pristine Himalayan mountains. Most of its ecosystems are virgin. They're untouched by human development. It is blessed with great biodiversity. It's blessed with a pristine environment. All right. And it has a very, very unique culture. Bhutan is a very spiritual country, very spiritual society. It's a Buddhist majority nation. Buddhism is the predominant religion. So this is something we connect with. Buddhism forms a common link, a common connection. Its spiritual, cultural faith and practices also associates with India's culture, right? And the geography is also something that we share. So this has led Bhutan to develop a very unique economy of its own. In fact, around the world, there is no such country, no such economy as Bhutan. Bhutan has the most unique economy in the world. Because see, every country is busy in increasing their pace of growth, right? Every country measures growth in terms of GDP, including India. We measure the quantity of goods, the value of goods that we are producing within our territory, which is the gross domestic product, right? This is a blind pursuit of growth. We are simply focused on statistical growth, and this growth comes at the cost of your environment. Any attempt at rapid industrialization and a blind focus only on production of goods will always lead to environment destruction, right? Because to improve your growth numbers, to improve your GDP numbers, you have to exploit your resources. You're going to destroy your own environment. You're going to harm your biodiversity, right? So usually these are contradictory. To promote growth, you have to compromise on your environment and biodiversity. It's very hard to find the balance. Most countries are going blindly behind statistical growth, GDP-led growth. But Bhutan is very different, very unique. It does not believe in this concept at all. The whole country, the nation itself, believes in something called GNH, the Gross National Happiness Index. It measures growth and performance through a happiness index. It measures how happy the country is, how happy the society is. So Bhutan has no faith in industrial exploitation. Is that clear? Bhutan gives a high priority for protecting its environment and biodiversity. This is inherent to their spirituality. There is a direct link between Bhutan's spirituality and its economic model. In fact, in the GNH index, these parameters are considered while calculating the index. Spirituality is given a weightage. Environment conservation, biodiversity protection has been given a weightage in the index. So Bhutan has stayed away from mindless industrial expansion. Bhutan does not believe in rampant exploitation of its pristine resources. Bhutan is very, very seriously committed about protecting its unique Himalayan ecosystem. It wants to conserve and protect the virgin forests and the resources that it is blessed with. This is a strong commitment that Bhutan has made towards its own country, its own geography. So Bhutan's economy is very, very different. It also has a very unique political system. Even today, Bhutan is a monarchy with an elected government. There are elections that happen. There is a government which is elected, but the head of the state is the king. So Bhutan is still a monarchy. It's not a democratic country. There is partial democracy in the form of elections through which a government is elected, but the government is under the king. The monarchy is still in power. So in every aspect, Bhutan is unique, be it its geography, its culture, its economy, and its political system. Now, India has respected this uniqueness. We have never forced our principles, our ideologies on Bhutan. We haven't forced Bhutan to become a democracy. We haven't meddled with the monarchy in Bhutan. We have never done that. In fact, India has great equations with the royal family in Bhutan. The king of Bhutan, the royal family have always been extremely close to India. In fact, Indian leaders, they've all shared very close personal relations with Bhutan's royal family. You look at the current king, for example, the current king of Bhutan and the current royal family. They have been very close to former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. They are very close to current Prime Minister Narendra Modi as well. There is that personal bond that exists. This is true since the days of Prime Minister Nehru, Indira Gandhi, Rajiv Gandhi, all of them, all the Indian leaders, they had very close equations, very close relations with Bhutan's monarchy. So there's a lot of trust and faith in this relationship. Bhutan has never done anything to upset India, to affect India's security interests. Bhutan understands that India's biggest concern here is China. Nothing else. We have no other threat, no other concern here. The primary concern we have is China. Bhutan has always respected this. It has always tried to protect the Indian interests, and it understands it's part of India's buffer strategy. Remember, we spoke about this in the last class. I told you how India has cultivated Nepal and Bhutan as buffer states against any Chinese aggression. This is a British era strategy we have borrowed when British India had cultivated all the Himalayan kingdoms as buffers against a possible invasion from Russia. We have continued this buffer strategy after independence to shield India against any Chinese aggression. So Nepal and Bhutan are the buffers which give us the cushion to shield ourselves from Chinese aggression, right? So Bhutan's cooperation is very essential to protect India's security interests against China. And in return, we have respected Bhutan's uniqueness. We have never meddled with the monarchy. We have never created any crisis, never interfered in their internal matters. We have never pushed for democracy, and we haven't pushed changes to Bhutan's economy. See, we know Bhutan is blessed with resources. If it was any other country, trust me, by now, they would have forced the small country to give up all its resources. If you look at powers like US, let's say, or China, if they had a small country like this with whom they were close, they would have forced that country to allow them to exploit all the resources. But India has never done that. That is something unique about this relationship. Because see, India is a fast-growing economy. We need a lot of resources, and Bhutan has some resources to provide. but we have never pushed Bhutan. We have never forced it to change its economic model. We have respected its unique economy. Bhutan does not believe in industrial exploitation, does not believe in large industries. It only practices basic agriculture, cottage industries, and tourism. That's it. Bhutan has a strong commitment to protect its environment, its culture, spirituality, its faith. All right. In fact, believe it or not, Bhutan is very conscious about global warming. It's not just a carbon neutral country, it's one of the few carbon negative countries. That's why Bhutan has become very popular in the field of climate change. All right. Countries are striving towards carbon neutrality today. Right. We have set targets for next 30, 40, 50 years to become carbon neutral. But Bhutan is already carbon negative, which means it is absorbing more greenhouse gases than it is emitting into the atmosphere. Because Bhutan has no industrial activity, no large scale industrial activity. It does not believe in modern consumerist capitalist growth. It has very basic subsistence agriculture, traditional industries, and tourism. This is the basic source of revenue. All right. So it does not contribute to pollution, to emissions. Rather, it is acting as a carbon sink, which is absorbing excess greenhouse gases. So India has respected this choice. If we wanted, we could have forced Bhutan. We could have unilaterally pushed Bhutan. It's a very small country, right? It's very dependent on India. We could have easily exploited the resources if we wanted. We have never done that. We have not meddled with its political system, the monarchy. We haven't forced Bhutan to change its economic model. We have respected its conservation model. In fact, we try to learn from it. We try to learn from Bhutan's conservation model. Today, it's a global leader in the field of climate action. That is something we would like to learn. So India-Bhutan have this trust-based relationship because we have never interfered, never meddled, never forced ourselves on Bhutan. Now, let's see how the relations have developed between these two countries. What are the key aspects of the relationship? As I was telling you, Bhutan was never part of the British Indian Empire. The British had kept Bhutan autonomous, just like Nepal. They granted autonomy to these kingdoms because they were all acting as buffers for British India. So we have continued this strategy post-independence against China. After India's independence, Bhutan remains a strategic buffer against any Chinese threat, against any Chinese aggression. This relationship is rooted in a treaty, the 1949 Friendship Treaty of India and Bhutan. This is the fundamental basis of this. Just like the 1950 Treaty of Peace and Friendship defines India-Nepal relations, similarly, India-Bhutan relations is defined by the 1949 Treaty. It was modeled on the 1910 Treaty, which was signed between Britain and Bhutan. Is that clear? Now, this treaty is very, very unique. Let me explain the key provision of the treaty. Under this treaty, India has promised to defend Bhutan against external threats, which basically means China, because there's no other external threat. Bhutan has borders only with two countries, India and China. Through this treaty, India has promised, we have a commitment, we have an obligation to protect and defend Bhutan if China were ever to attack Bhutan. If China were to threaten Bhutan's sovereignty and integrity, India has a duty and an obligation to stand up and defend Bhutan, to give military support, to defend the country against Chinese threat. In return for this promise from India, Bhutan had literally outsourced its foreign policy to India so that India could guide Bhutan in its foreign relations. India could conduct Bhutan's foreign policy on its behalf, and India could ensure that there are no threats to our strategic interests. Now, that is the uniqueness of this agreement. Is that clear? This is a very, very unique agreement. Because a foreign country, an independent sovereign country, has literally outsourced its foreign policy to India through this treaty. Now, you tell me which country will agree to this. No country would give up its foreign policy making powers. But through the 1949 treaty, Bhutan agreed that it will be guided by India in its foreign relations. All right. And in return, we promised to defend Bhutan against external threats. We also promised to not interfere, to not meddle in the internal matters of Bhutan. This is a commitment we made to each other. This remained from 1949 till 2007. Is that clear? Since 1949 till 2007, Bhutan's foreign policy was guided by India. It meant India was deciding on Bhutan's behalf. Bhutan would always consult India, ask India's permission, approval as to how to conduct foreign policy of Bhutan with other countries. Essentially, India was running Bhutan's foreign policy until 2007. All right. In return, we had promised to not meddle, not interfere, and to defend the country if the need arises. This allowed India to remain in full control. It allowed India to retain its influence in the region and protect the northeast region of India from any Chinese threats. That is the assistance Bhutan has given to India. It made a commitment through a treaty that for Chinese threats. That is the assistance Bhutan has given to India. It made a commitment through a treaty that foreign policy will be guided by India, and India will defend the country. All right. In 2007, this treaty has been updated. It has been reviewed and updated. It was renegotiated. And after this, after the new treaty replaced the 1949 treaty, since then, Bhutan is no longer guided by India in its foreign policy. It is no longer guided by India in its foreign policy. Why? Because Bhutan had expressed an interest to conduct its own foreign policy, especially with regard to climate action efforts. Bhutan was becoming very popular. So assistance Bhutan has given to India. It made a commitment to a treaty that foreign policy will be guided by India, and India will defend the country. All right. It was renegotiated. No longer guided by India in its foreign policy. It is no longer guided by India in its foreign policy. Why? Because Bhutan had expressed an interest to conduct its own foreign policy, especially with regard to climate action efforts. Bhutan was becoming very popular. So Bhutan was having a representation at the UN, at the United Nations. It was interacting with various countries on the climate change issue. So on these matters, Bhutan wanted independent interactions. It wanted to run its own foreign policy. So when Bhutan expressed this interest to renew the treaty, update it, India showed willingness. We were more than willing. We weren't insecure. We didn't try to prevent Bhutan from doing this. We agreed to allow Bhutan to run its own foreign policy independent of India, and that again shows the trust and faith in the relationship. If there was no trust, if Bhutan had ever threatened Indian interests, India wouldn't have agreed to this, right? We would have forced Bhutan to accept our guidance in its foreign policy. We didn't do that. When Bhutan asked for a renegotiation and upgradation of the treaty, we happily agreed to it because we know that Bhutan will never betray India. It has never done that in the past. So India renegotiated the treaty, and right now, since 2007, Bhutan has been conducting its own foreign policy. But even now, Bhutan consults with India very closely. Even after 2007, it consults India before taking any big decision. It may not be guided by India entirely. India may not be running the foreign policy anymore. But even today, it takes India's consultation, India's advice on key foreign policy matters. Because Bhutan and China have a major border dispute. Just like India, China have a border dispute, Bhutan and China also have a border dispute. So China is a threat to Bhutan, and that is where India comes in to protect and defend Bhutan. We are still obligated to defend Bhutan, protect the country against external aggression. Is that clear? Even in the new treaty, even though Bhutan is not guided by India in its foreign policy, we have an obligation to not interfere in its internal matters and to support and defend the country if there is any external threat. So that is a unique strategic relationship that we have built with this country. Is that clear? This treaty contained important security clauses. India took an obligation to defend Bhutan against external threats, and especially after the Chinese annexation of Tibet. This became a valid, serious concern for both the countries. Understood? So that is the kind of relations we have built because Bhutan has sought India's security, India's defense. China is seen as a major threat by both the countries, so it naturally brings India, Bhutan together. All right. Now, Bhutan is such a small country. All right. Its economy actually brings India, Bhutan together. All right. Now, Bhutan is such a small country, and especially after the Chinese for both the countries. Understood? So that is the kind of relations we have built because Bhutan has sought India's security, India's defense. China is seen as a major threat by both the countries, so it naturally brings India, Bhutan together. All right. Now, Bhutan is such a small country. All right. Its economy is so limited that it constantly needs external financial support. Is that clear? This was especially true from 1947 till almost 2010. For this entire period, Bhutan was completely dependent on India for financial assistance. It did not have much sources of revenue because Bhutan never carried out industrial development, never focused on polluting industries. It never expanded its agriculture beyond a certain point. Bhutan wanted its economy to remain limited. So as a result, Bhutan was struggling to create basic infrastructure in the country. Bhutan alone couldn't have created the basic infrastructure because see, you're dealing with the Himalayan terrain. In the Himalayan belt, where you have these high altitude mountains, snow-capped mountains, then you have these dense forests and jungles. It's not easy to create the required infrastructure. It's not easy to build roads, bridges, tunnels. Right? It's going to be very expensive, requires a lot of technical expertise. So for a country like Bhutan, a small country like Bhutan, it's not easy to create such infrastructure. Now this is where India has helped Bhutan. Since 1947-49, we have been constantly helping Bhutan in its development, in its infrastructure creation. In fact, in the initial years, Bhutan's 5-year plans were entirely financed by the Indian budget. Even Bhutan had adopted the 5-year plans from India. The planned model of development had been adopted by Bhutan as well. In the initial decades, in the first 20 to 25 years especially, Bhutan's 5-year plans, its development initiatives were entirely funded by India's budget. In our union budget, every year we would make an allocation. Hundreds of crores, thousands of crores would be allocated to Bhutan every year, just like money is allocated to Indian states. Similarly, separate allocation, budgetary allocation was made to Bhutan. Now that is the kind of close relations we have built over the years. Essentially, its economy, its budget was dependent on India. India was financing its budget. So to help in the creation of basic infrastructure, we had launched an important project in 1962 called Project Dantak. It was launched by then Prime Minister Nehru. It was a brainchild of Prime Minister Nehru, one of his key contributions to India-Bhutan relations. It was launched by the then Prime Minister with the then King of Bhutan, and under this, the Indian Army and the BRO, Border Roads Organization, they have created the basic infrastructure that was needed in Bhutan. Is that clear? Initial roads were built by India, financed entirely by India, built by Indian engineers. Key projects like power projects, technical assistance in key domains like agriculture, healthcare, education, training of their personnel, all of this has been taken up under this ambitious project. Initially, it was meant only for road construction. When Project Dantak was launched, it was meant only to construct roads. But later, it has been expanded to cover other infrastructure, other development areas as well. We have built hydropower plants. Many successful hydro projects have come up. We have set up power lines, power grids have been created. Telecom mobile infrastructure has been created. We even provide skill training, skill development. Skill development in the field of agriculture, healthcare, education. We have built schools. We carry out training programs. More importantly, Bhutan's personnel, Bhutan's bureaucrats, diplomats, its armed forces, they're all trained in Indian institutions. The Royal Bhutanese Army, for example, is trained with Indian Army at Indian military academies. All right. Similarly, Bhutan's bureaucrats, diplomats, police officers, they train with our civil service probationers. When let's say you clear the exam, you go to Labasna for your foundational course, for your probationary training. Let's say you proceed to Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel National Police Academy at Hyderabad for IPS probationers. At these training academies, you will find that there will be officers, probationers from Bhutan as well. In fact, there are few countries whom we help in training to train their civil servants, their bureaucrats, diplomats, police officers, etc. So Bhutan's officials, the probationers, right, they train with Indian probationers. That is the close relationship that we have built. We provide extensive training to their personnel. All right. In fact, there's always a deployment of Indian Army inside Bhutan. There is a permanent deployment. We even carry out joint patrols. We conduct joint patrolling along the China border. Is that clear? The Indian Army is deployed here to assist in training. We supply weapons as well. We conduct joint exercises, joint patrols. Together, we guard Bhutan's borders with China. So that is the kind of close relations the two countries have. It's truly an exercises, joint patrols. The Indian Army is in training. We supply weapons as well. We conduct joint exercises, joint patrols. Together, we guard Bhutan's borders with China. So that is the kind of close relations the two countries have. It's truly an exemplary relationship because we have made massive investments in the hydropower sector. India has successfully executed many hydropower projects, and today, Bhutan is generating surplus electricity. We have basically tapped the potential of Bhutan. I told you, right, Himalayan states, they have tremendous hydropower potential, and this has been genuinely tapped by India, and also this is environment friendly, right, compared to thermal electricity or thermal power generated by coal and fossil fuels. Hydropower is any day clean, green, and renewable. It is environment friendly, it is sustainable, right, its ecological impact can be minimized. So this is a priority area for Bhutan. It's a green energy, and India has helped Bhutan. We have executed many key projects. For prelims, it's better you remember the names of some important hydropower plants. We have built hydro plants at Chuka, Kurichu, and Tala. These are major hydropower facilities. Recently, we have completed the Mangdechu hydropower project. There are ongoing projects at Punat Sangchu 1 and 2, all right? And we have proposed another new project called the Kolongchu hydropower project. This was recently launched in 2020. So we have invested in many hydropower plants. We have successfully executed these projects along with creating the infrastructure needed for Bhutan. India has not only funded these projects, we have executed them as well. We not only give the budgetary support through our budget. Budgetary support has been extended, all right? So we not only give the funds, we execute the projects as well, because such projects are an engineering challenge. Building such projects, such large public projects in the Himalayan belt is nothing short of a technological marvel, right? Because the terrain, the geography here is very, very difficult, very complicated. And in such a terrain, we have executed such projects. All right, so we've given all the financial technical support needed, and today Bhutan is generating surplus electricity. And because of this, it is exporting the electricity to India, Nepal, and Bangladesh via Indian grids. And as a result, Bhutan has become more self-sufficient in its economy. It is no longer heavily dependent on India for financial support. See, even now we allocate a lot of development assistance. Even in this year's budget, as I told you, Bhutan has got the majority share. Almost 2,000 crore rupees has been provided in this year's budget as well. This financial support is there every year towards Bhutan. But its dependency on India has gone down. Because today Bhutan is generating decent revenue through tourism and through sale of electricity, through export of electricity. Is that clear? So India plays a key role in both of them. Indian tourists are the majority visitors to Bhutan. We contribute revenue to the country. All right, and this tourism is ecotourism. Bhutan levies a very high fee. It does not allow as any number of tourists. It keeps a cap every year, right? That's why Bhutan's border is not fully open. The border is actually a partially open border with India. You don't need a visa to go to Bhutan, but however, you need a travel document, you need a travel permit. So it's not a fully open border like the Nepal border. Nepal border you can simply cross. You don't need any kind of immigration process. But towards Bhutan, there is a limited check which happens. You don't need a visa. Indians don't need a visa to go to Bhutan. However, there is a permit you need to get. If you're going to the country as a tourist, you need a permit. You have to pay a fee, a development fee, which is used towards environment protection. So the tourism promoted by Bhutan is sustainable. Bhutan's priority is always sustainable growth. It only promotes sustainable projects such as hydropower projects. It only promotes ecotourism, and Indian tourists are the biggest source of revenue for Bhutan. And sale of electricity to India and further to Nepal and Bangladesh also fetches a lot of revenue to Bhutan. So today, by and large, Bhutan has become more self-reliant, more independent, and today it has one of the highest per capita incomes in South Asia. Is that clear? It has one of the highest per capita incomes in the South Asia region. It's all thanks to India's efforts, because India has helped Bhutan's economy